Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing a tier list for every role on patch 10.13. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton. If you want to get notifications, be sure to enable the notifications on YouTube, and then also be sure to click on that bell on the YouTube channel in order to get the notifications for this specific channel. We stream every night starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you join us. And then I've been doing lots of daily videos as well on different topics. So recently I've done toxicity in League, the ethics of smurfing, can supports carry, what does carrying mean, and a variety of other topics that we've done recently and that are upcoming in the future. So be sure to come by, check out the channel to get all of that. Other topics that we've done are just like one-trick videos, tier lists, how to macro better, how to micro better, coaching sessions, just all sorts of stuff on the channel. So be sure to check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Now, I'm not going to be able to touch on all of these. I'm going to mention 5 champs for each role, but obviously trying to cover every single role in a video, and I really want to try to make this 15 to 30 minutes. I know it's like a meme on this channel. All my videos are way longer typically, but I really need to try to get it into that range. So we're just going to hit sort of the highlights and try to move through since we're trying to cover 25 different champions here. Okay, so I have an in-depth support tier list that's separate from this one, so I'm not going to do as much about the supports, but be sure to watch that if you want more information on that. And I'll have a link to this Google Doc and timestamps in the description so you can jump around to the roles you're most interested in as well. But Soraka, I think, overall is going to be the strongest support right now. And this is primarily targeted towards, like, silver, gold, platinum, that kind of range, kind of the mid-elo, so I like to call it, probably even low diamond. But once you start getting into master tier, you know, up through pro play, and then once you're in, like, maybe iron or something like that, then it might be a little bit different. This is kind of, you know, skewed towards kind of that mid-elo. I think that Soraka is super strong right now. The biggest stuff about her, if we click on her, is just the sheer scaling of her. And it's so difficult to deal with her healing later on in the game. She just does so much, and the big traits are such a low cooldown, a 2-second cooldown, and the fact that it doesn't cost her any health anymore in team fights, and it's a really low mana cost. So if she goes unchecked in team fights, she just puts out such an astronomical amount of healing that it's just almost impossible to get through it unless you kill her. You have to kill her or you will lose fights that last longer than 3 seconds, right? If she gets off 2 or 3 of these heals, you're just not going to be able to kill anybody anymore. And it used to cost her health whenever she healed people before they did like a little mini rework of her back early on in the season. But now that it's 100% free, she just gets so much more effective health, so it makes it so much more difficult to kill her. Because if you think about it, if she has like 1,500 health in the mid game, you know, with assuming she's taking Relic Shield, assuming she's taking one sort of small health item like a Redemption or a Shirelia's or something like that, maybe has 200 or 300 health on it, she's gonna have like maybe 1,500 to 2,000 health. If she has 1,500 health, you know, and she healed people 5 times before this change, it used to be 10% of her maximum health every time. So 5 times would you know, effectively do 750 health or damage to her, right? Be 50% of her max health, so that's 750 damage, right? And, you know, when you start to take resistances into account, if she had like 30 armor or something like that, you would have had to have dealt, you know, something like 900 physical damage, maybe 1,000 physical damage to do the 750 after resistances. So, I mean, it's basically true damage. In other words, she was dealing true damage to herself in order to do that healing. So that means her effective health pool was only like, you know, 50% of what it used to be. But now she's getting, you know, 50% more health than she had before. And that's only if she does 5 heals. If she goes through and does like 10 heals in a fight, which is totally possible in longer fights, you know, that wouldn't have even been possible before. So this health refund thing, if she hits her Q and gets refunds on the health, just huge for her own personal survivability in fights. It is way more difficult to pick her off and kill her in fights because she gets so much extra health off of that. And they increased the base healing. It used to be 190, I believe, and now or maybe 200, and now it's 220. So that's a lot. Now, yes, her Q healing to herself and her ally has been lowered, for sure. This used to be 140, I believe, and now it's down to 90. And the AP ratio has been lowered, so yes, that's not as good as it used to be. I think her Q damage may have been lowered a little bit too, so yes, that's not as good as it used to be. But she does get a lot of personal safety, and she still puts out huge numbers. And the thing that separates her from stuff like a Lulu or a Janna or some of those other champions is the cooldown. It's a 2-second cooldown on her heal. So she can spam this a ton. And if you think, oh, well, I can just get grievous wounds against her, it's like, yeah, that kind of helps. But, even if you're reducing it by 40%, she can still get off 4 of these in the same time that something like a Lulu can shield. So it says 220 here on her heal, but with a 0.6 ratio, but basically if you can cast 4 of these in the 8-second window that would take Lulu to shield, that turns into a 2.4 AP ratio and an 880 base heal that also gets empowered to be even larger with the Q. So that's massive when you consider, Lulu's shield is not going to be reduced by grievous wounds, but its base is 220. So even if you take that 880 and you grievous wound it, it's like, oh, I'm reducing it by 40%. It's like, okay, it's still like 500 something with a, like a 1.7 ratio or something crazy like that. So yes, grievous wounds is nice. It is helpful against Soraka, but she does such an overwhelming amount of healing, especially once you start getting some AP and plus healing and shielding and Athene's Unholy Grail with Revitalize. It's so much that it's just impossible to handle unless you kill her. And kind of newer builds with her, you take Barrier, and then you can still take Guardian on her, I think is still really good. It makes it difficult to kill her. And if you take Swiftness Boots, which is the standard, plus her Q, giving her percentage movement speed increase with the Swiftness, increasing her base, she just becomes very mobile in fights, and it's just really, really difficult to blow her up. And her R heals herself for a very large amount. So remember that this is increased by 50% whenever she heals someone below 40%, including herself. So if you're trying to all in and kill her, and she puts a silence on you if you get on top of her with Equinox, and then, will Barrier to give herself a huge shield. Barrier also scales with plus healing and shielding and Revitalize, by the way. And then she wishes to buff herself up, and then she Qs to heal herself over time and also run away. And if she has flash up, she can do that too. It's just really, really difficult to get on her and kill her right now. So I think she's must pick, must ban if you're platinum or lower. If you don't have a good strategy against her. And a lot of the stuff that's good against her has been nerfed, right? The Nautilus, the Leona. You can still pick those and still get on her. Leona's probably the best, I think, just because you can go through minions and you have a really long range engage with her ult that doesn't require a clear shot. It goes through minions. Everything goes through minions with Leona. She's probably the best, but if the game goes long, Soraka is going to be able to heal through most of that type of stuff. No one can body block the Leona Q stuff either, which is really important. Nautilus later on in the game, other tanks on your team can body block. You can hide behind other people. You can hide behind walls. What is it, Roy? Did it fall down? Okay, hand it to Daddy. I'll fix it. So, anyways, I think she's super strong right now. I think she's must pick, must ban. Other champs that I think are good. I think that Rakan is actually pretty good. He did get a buff on this patch. Okay, hang on, Ryan. There you go. Rakan did get a buff on this patch. People were kind of memeing it. It is only 10 more damage early on with the W, but that does add up. It is kind of useful. And he's just a good sort of all-around pick. He's nice, blind pickable champion because he can operate as really strong engage for your team, but then he can also get things like Zeke's and Ardent Sensor in order to help out your ADCs. And that's a common theme with a lot of these champs, with the exception being Malachi's. I think Ardent Sensor meta is coming back into effect. Ardent Sensor, 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever, is definitely coming back. ADCs are becoming a lot stronger, especially... well, I guess not. A lot of the ADCs actually don't use Ardent Sensors super well, but I think that ADCs are very strong, especially once you start getting into higher elo brackets right now, if, they get to scale and get the kind of proper protection that they need. So champs that can get Ardent are going to be pretty good right now. And there's a lot of other champs that have that really like attack speed that are kind of coming back into the meta as well. I mean, Twisted Fate gets a lot of auto attacks in there. You have stuff like Master Yi, auto attacks a lot. Stuff like Volibear, then your Darius, your Wukong set, Garen, all of this stuff. You know, the attack speed's going to be good with Ardent Sensor. So Rakan is kind of a blend of Enchanter and Engage. He can give you the Engage if you need that on your team, which is always pretty good. He has very good peel. But he also scales like an Enchanter with a very nice shield that has a 1.6 AP ratio and a 280 base shield. So it's, you know, low-key one of the best shields in the game. And it gives you a lot of mobility as well. So he's very flexible. He can get outscaled by Soraka because, once again, it's that cooldown on the W. It's just so extreme. The 2-second cooldown is massive. So he can get outscaled by her, but he has pretty good game against a lot of the other... against a lot of the other enchanters out there. He can get on him. He can start fights. And he's pretty good against Leona and Nautilus. A lot of people think that those champs hard counter him. They really don't that much. Guardian did get nerfed, which he does use, but you can dodge their engage pretty easily with your W and your E. And if they do engage on one of your allies, you just ult and then shield with your Guardian. That'll give enough protection, usually to prevent an outright all-in burst. And then it's going to CC the person that engaged on your ADC or whoever else, and then you can W back out to hit the enemy ADC. So you can usually nullify a lot of engages pretty well, and then after that point, you know, your Enchanter aspects kick in, and you just give so much extra survivability and so many extra buffs to your allies that you can usually overcome that. So he is going to be really strong right now. Janna's another one that's been creeping up a little bit, and I hadn't been really that sure about Janna over the last year or so. She's had a high win rate for a while now. You know, she's sitting at like a 52.5% win rate. So, and I really like this tool too, by the way, Lolalytics, because it does tell you pick ban, and then if you click on a champion, it'll tell you, you know, common itemization, all that, but it'll also tell you win rates based on item, based on game length. And a lot of other interesting stats out there. So, I mean, there we go. Based on item, based on game length, and all that kind of stuff. So if you're really not sure, if you're thinking like, hey, should I be building, you know, Grasp Senna or Glacial Augment Senna or whatever, you can see the different builds and the different win rates, pick rates, all that kind of stuff. So it's got a lot of really good data for you out there. But one of the new tools they added in here is Pick Ban Influence. So you can see a champion's, it tells you the formula right here, but it's basically a champion's win rate, and then it multiplies it by the pick rate divided by the ban rate. So it just kind of puts presence in there. So it's not just, okay, here's an obscure champion that has a high win rate. It's like, okay, usually it's a champion that has a very high presence, pick rate, and ban rate, which means they're around a lot, there's a lot of data for them, and they have a high win rate. Usually. So that's just a really good tool to help you sort of conceptualize and see a lot of different champions in terms of presence and win rate, which is nice. That kind of weeds out the, okay, you know, 1/10 of a percent of people play this obscure champion and have a high win rate. It's like, all right, it's probably very specific comps or one tricks or Smurfs just goofing around. So it kind of weeds some of that stuff out. But anyways, Janna, I think, is actually pretty strong right now, and I actually do favor her over Lulu. I've been playing a few games of Janna and then a few games of Lulu. Recently, they do have very similar win rates. Lulu has a lot more visibility right now. She's getting picked a lot more and banned a lot more. She's being seen in higher elo. So I'll start with Janna, then we'll talk about Lulu because she's the next on the list. But Janna, I really like in solo queue, especially at Platinum and lower, because she's really fast and she can roam around the map extremely well with her W. So you can take Boots of Swiftness on her, or Ionians, or honestly you can just get away with Brown Boots if you don't even want to complete your tier 2 boots for a while and just save the 600 gold and put it towards completing your first item a lot faster. She can do that because she gets so much extra movement speed off her W. She has great point-click harassment that has really nice range. It's deceptive if you look at her because it says it's only 550, but it's like from the edge of her hitbox to the edge of the enemy's hitbox. I don't know why they have that in the game, but there are some champions that are just like that, and it's just really weird. But that basically means that it's like closer to 650 or 700 range on it. So once again, I don't know why they do that. It's confusing for a lot of people who look at these kinds of stats. But that's just what it is. See, it says it's the edge range here. Yeah, so it's just really weird. So it makes it more effective against larger hitbox champions. So like a big Cho'Gath or something, it's going to have even more range. So anyways, it's good. It's point click. It's cheap. They have nerfed this over time where it does less damage than it used to, but really good harassment tool in the laning phase. Some people take Arcane Comet with that because it does apply a slow. I still like doing Airy. It still provides good harassment early on, but then scales better on with shields. But just the big thing about Janna is just that movement speed, so you can get around the map really quickly, and then she has multiple forms of disengage. So that does make her very safe as well. So you can, more confidently walk into the enemy jungle, get some of that deeper vision, and you can position as such in team fights to where you're not going to get hit by as much just random AoE stuff, random CC, like Amumu's ults, Rumble ults, Zed tackling somebody, it is all kinds of random CC and random AoE effects. You're not going to get hit by it as much because you can reposition a lot easier, and your shield is on a long range, so it's 800 cast range. So you can feel more confident rotating between lanes, trying to rotate to help out a side lane or make a play, cross-map play, because the speed not only gets you there faster, but the fact that you combine that with her tornado and with the shield, all of which she can cast while she's moving, without using any sort of animation speed, which is really nice. And then you can use the Monsoon as well to get out. So she has a lot of get out of jail free cards, a lot of movement speed. So if you get intercepted while you're going between places, then you're ready to go, right? You've got your tornado, you've got your shield, you've got your ult, you're fast. It's going to be really hard to catch you. Yes, you're still going to get blown up if Kha'Zix jumps on you, but you have a lot of tools to get away from that. That's different from Lulu, which we'll talk about in a second, who is really vulnerable on rotations, has much shorter ranges, and if she wants movement speed, she has to use her key ability to do it. So I think that Janna is a lot safer than Lulu, especially in YOLO queue where you're running around, and constantly trying to put out fires. Janna can step up, try to save people, and if it doesn't work out, it's okay because she's probably going to get away anyways. And she has very good scaling as well, right? So she has a pretty respectable shield, which usually ends up being about on an 8 to 10 second cooldown if you hit people with at least your W and potentially your Q. It does refund some of the cooldown. And it gives out AD. So this allows you to play around any AD champion out there pretty well, right? Lulu, the attack speed buff with her picks and with her W, picks giving extra on attack and then W giving the actual attack speed, works really well with champions that get a lot of attack speed or that have different sorts of on-hit effects. But this AD actually works pretty well with assassins as well, or longer range champions, especially stuff that wants to crit or stuff that does a lot of damage off abilities. So you can even put this on something like a Kha'Zix or something like a Zed or whatever, and giving them 50 extra AD is going to increase their damage output by a ton. Or like long-range Varus sniping or Ezreal hitting people with Qs. Whatever it is, this AD ratio is very, very nice, even on some of the bruisers that may not necessarily care as much about the attack speed. So it is a pretty nice shield. And then, of course, your ultimate does massive AoE healing, displacements. It's just very, very good for resetting a team fight and just healing everybody to full. So very good AoE effect. So that's why I like Janna. She can just adapt a little bit more to different kinds of champions and playstyles with the movement speed, with the shield buff, and things like that. So I just like her just because she's, traditionally one of the queens of solo queue because she's so fast and she's so safe. So she has the ability to try to save stupid plays a lot and turn them around without really risking her own life that often to do so because of the range and the speed. Lulu, on the other hand, a lot less safe because she can be intercepted in transit. She also has really low movement speed, and sort of your only answer to get out of that with Lulu is to use your W, which will increase your own movement speed, but it's on a fairly long cooldown, it's 12 seconds, and if you use your W, then you don't have it for anything else. You don't have the polymorph if you speed yourself up. If you do polymorph somebody who's running at you, they still get to move. They just have reduced movement speed, and you're still really slow. So they're probably going to be able to catch you after they get done with the polymorph, because it's not a stun. They can still move. So that's really one of the main things with Lulu. She's super strong if your team's ahead, and she has lots of aggression, right? Like her W can also speed up Darius, Set, Garrett, and stuff like that to get them close to engage. Janna doesn't have a great way to help your team engage. Lulu does. And then her single target buff is huge on something like an ADC or something else that attacks a lot, because your Fairy Companion does about 80 damage on attack in the mid game with standard items. Hey, thanks for the sub, I appreciate it. And then you're also giving out movement speed and attack speed, so your AD carry is going to be able to position better and just land a lot more auto attacks in fights. So she puts out a lot of extra DPS, or I guess allows your teammates to put out a ton of extra DPS. And then your ult is really strong, especially in the early to mid game before you the enemy support can get a lot of plus healing and shielding. Because it's just a very large infusion of health. It's 300 at level 6, which is massive. And it knocks people up, provides a little bit of extra CC and sticking power, slows people that are around the person by 30%. It's on a very low cooldown, and it gets around grievous wounds because it's an infusion of health. So even if they're ignited or, the enemy has an Executioner's Calling or whatever, you get around that really well as Lulu. The problem is later on, when you're facing something like a Soraka or a Janna, they do scale with plus healing and shielding versus your Wild Growth does not, because it's an infusion of health. So they will outscale you, and this is single target versus, Soraka and Janna can potentially heal multiple targets. So in certain situations, she can get outscaled late game, but she does have an extremely good early game, and she's particularly good at buffing up ADCs or like Master Yis or other things that just want to auto attack a lot. She does have very nice harass in the early game. It is notable that it's pretty close range at 650, and it is dangerous sometimes for you to go up and harass. Like Janna can go up and spam W on people, because if they try to engage, she can use a tornado and disengage and get out of that, and she's just faster. Versus Lulu, you're walking up, you're probably going to be slower, and if they hard engage, you don't have as many tools to stop that. You do have your Whimsy, but it is a little riskier, especially if they have a Lulu or a Nautilus or a Nautilus or a Leona or something like that on their team. It is a little riskier, but she does have very, very good harass, point click, 650 range. It feels a little bit closer than Janna's, but not much. It's pretty close to Janna's. And you can use your Q, so you have two different pieces of harass. You can E plus Q combo. Now that will chew through your mana really fast early on before you get Fairy Charms, but it can do a lot of damage. So Lulu, very good, a lot stronger in the early game. You get your Ardent Sensor, and you just have really high base effectiveness off of your Whimsy, off of your shield. It's a very low cooldown. It's 8 seconds, even at level 1, versus Janna's shield starts off, I think, at 18 seconds and scales down to 12. So Lulu is way, way better in the early game than Janna's going to be in a lot of situations. So if you can snowball really hard, or you have a very aggressive early lane champ, you got Jhin, Draven, stuff like that, then Lulu's going to be really strong. And then Maokai is kind of the flex pick that I really like a lot. He still has a pretty good win rate, very low presence though. He still has like a 52.5% win rate. And I prefer him over Nautilus and Leona. He doesn't get talked about a lot, but the big thing for me is that he has a point-click W, which can't be dodged by Vayne or Lucian or Ezreal if you get in a range. So there are a lot of champs that are just going to have a hard time getting around him. And he has very good vision control with his seeds. They last a long time. You just put them in bushes. Basically, effectively gives you an extra ward or two a lot of the time, which is a big deal. And it has pretty high base damages at 14% max health for just 1 point. Your Q also serves as a displacement, so you can peel people off really well. Your Leonas, your Zacs, Nautilus, Lee Sin, Jarvan. Anything that's trying to jump at you, kind of like a Janna Tornado, you can peel it back with that W, or with the Q rather. And it does quite a bit of respectable damage. I think it's like 250 damage on like a 5-second cooldown, potential AoE. So he has quite a bit of damage built into his kit, and it's just the the lack of counterplay to his W is the huge thing. It also makes you untargetable, so you can just get to their backline and they can't really peel it. It's kind of like a Leona E. It's just going to get there, right? So you can even go through things like Vagar cages. You can get onto Vagar and just kind of go through the cage. You can dodge skill shots with that, so you can dodge Ash Arrows with your W. You can dodge like Jinx Rockets, all sorts of stuff when you get used to it. You can jump to enemy minions to dodge that type of stuff too. Resets tower aggro, so you can get tower aggro with your Q if you're on a dive, and then you can use your W to target an enemy minion and drop the tower aggro as well. So there's a lot of little tricks you can do with Maokai that you can't do with Leona and Nautilus. Now, they have their places too, and they are really strong, but I just think the biggest thing is the vision control and the lack of counterplay. There's no way they're getting away from your W, and that's why I like him. He is shorter range, so you don't have the long range engage of the Leona or the Nautilus, so you have to either flank or get something like Righteous Glory or use your flash to get on people, but so that makes him a little bit less well-suited to go after things like Senna or Caitlyn or other long-range threats. But once again, for kind of these short-range threats that are highly mobile, your Lucians, your Varuses, your Echoes, your Dianas, that type of stuff, he's going to do very well. So he is a little more situational, but I think that he's really good. Okay, let's talk about the non-supports here. Now, half our video has been supports again, and I said that I wouldn't do that much support, but whatever. I know a lot of my audience are support mains. Okay, ADCs. I think that Varus is still super strong right now. Yes, they did nerf him a little bit. I can't even honestly remember what the nerf was. I think it was last, the patch before this one, but it doesn't matter. He's still ridiculously strong. In solo queue, like, his win rate's not as high. In pro, it's super good. But I still think that he is very strong in the right hands just because he has so much utility. So even if you fall behind, you still have lots of stuff you can do, right? You have very strong poke with your Q charge, and the lethality Varus is the one I'm talking about. On hit can be really good too. If you have an Ardent Sensor user and you think you're going to be team fighting a lot, I think on hit is still very respectable as well. But he has the really strong engage that can spread and hit multiple targets in team fights. He has the strong poke. He has the built-in grievous wounds with his E. His itemization is really strong. He's one of the only mainstream ADCs that can itemize into lethality, which means he gets Umbral Glaive. That's an extra sweeper for your team. He can get stuff like Ghost Blade, which helps you position and sort of kite out some of these other champions a little bit better. Dust Blade for the poke. Edge of Night to help against hook champions, right? If they have a Blitzcrank or they have, Nautilus, Leona, whatever, Edge of Night is a massive nuisance for those champs. So he just has so much utility in his items and in his kit. He can, adapt to a bunch of different situations. He can go on hit, he can go poke. So he's just super versatile right now and is very, very strong, very difficult to engage onto. So I think Varus is extremely good right now. And you'll notice a common trend between a lot of these champions is going to be... What is it, Brian? You want what? MMs? Okay. Is going to be that a lot of them aren't going to get BF sword items. There's a couple of different... I mean, you've got Aphelios and Misfortune in there. But a lot of the top-end picks are not going to be getting BF swords because that item is just a pain in the butt. I talked about this in the recent itemization video, so be sure to check that out. There you go. Can you say thank you? That item's just a pest to complete, though. You have to have very, very specific back timings, and especially if you're going Infinity Edge, you have to get 3 different items that are very annoying to get. Right, you have to get BF Sword, which is super annoying, but then you also have to get Pickaxe and Crit Cloak. And if you ever have to take a back, with like 600 gold, and if you ADC main and you play champs that need Infinity Edge, you know what I'm talking about. Super annoying. It's like, okay, you get a kill early in the lane, you've got 800 gold. Do you go back for Pickaxe? Do you go back for BF Sword and, slow down your build? You just got an advantage on them, right? You poked them out of lane, but you only have 600 gold, in your inventory. Do you overstay for another wave, or do you back and, keep up the tempo advantage? So it's just really annoying, and champions that can get around that by building Blade the Ruined King, or can build lethality, or sometimes even Storm Razor, things like that. It just feels way better, and it just allows you much more flexibility in how you want to manage the wave and how you want to manage your tempo, back timings, and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, Varus does that super well. Lethality itemization is some of the best in the game. Has lots of different items that have, great different purposes, but are still very strong. The only other thing is like Enchanter itemization is really good for similar reasons. Has very cheap components. Enchanters just buy a bunch of fairy charms and amp tomes, ruby crystals, that kind of stuff. And they all have cheap items that are, between 2,000 and 2,300 gold mostly. Lethality is very similar. You just buy a bunch of long swords. Oh, and the enchanter stuff is very modular. If you're just sitting on a forbidden idol, you can build that into 3 different items. You can get Ardent Censer, Redemption, or Shirelia's all off that item. So you can wait and see. Just get the forbidden idol, wait another 3 to 5 minutes, see how the game's shaking out, and then you can adapt your build. It's the same thing with lethality, right? Just get a bunch of long swords, get some serrated dirks, and stuff like that, Caulfield Warhammer, and you can build it into a bunch of different items. So you can just kind of see, okay, do I really need Ghostblade here? Do I need to get Edge of Night? Do they have some kind of engage that's a problem? Am I really far ahead? Do I want to get Dustblade to push my advantage? Do I want to get Umbral Glaive and just, get a better vision game going? You have the luxury of doing that, and most ADCs don't have that. So I think that it's just the total package for Varus. Some of the best itemization in the game for an ADC, and one of the best kits for an ADC. So I think he's super strong right now. And the fact that he can flex into a really high, a good poke champion or a very high sustained damage champion by going for the Blade of the Ruined King, which is once again, a really friendly build path, and going into something like Hurricane, which is going to be strong late. You could even get something like Wit's End or Nashers. I think that people don't do the AP with Nashers anymore, but even just like Blade of the Ruined King into Hurricane into Wit's End could still be a very viable sort of defensive build. Okay, Aphelios is another one that I think is really strong still. Yes, he did get nerfed on this patch, but he's still just going to be super strong. He just does too much, right? He has built-in sustain with his lifesteal gun. He has built-in CC with his purple gun. He has really long range with the sniper rifle if he needs that. Really good wave clear with the flamethrower. It just goes on and on and on. He just has a gun for every situation. He just has way too much utility. His numbers are still really high. He puts up big damage even after all of the nerfs. He's not as ridiculous as he used to be, but he still just has way too much damage for the utility that he has. Now, he is someone that I believe is still getting the Infinity Edge build. I was kind of speculating that, maybe it's possible that... Now, technically, don't let it fool you. He does have one of the lowest win rates for an ADC right now, but that's just a lot of people that see him in Pro and just play him in solo queue and just don't really know what they're doing with him. But it looks like it is still the Infinity Edge build. I was speculating maybe like a Blade of the Ruined King build could be okay, but it looks like pretty much nobody's doing that. There's a couple of people that are trying it out, 37 or whatever, 23, as opposed to 55,000 people that are getting Infinity Edge. So it does have a higher win rate, but with such a small sample size, you can't really draw conclusions for that. But anyways, still super strong, lots of utility, lots of damage. He's going to be really good. Ezreal's another one that, I've been a hater of Ezreal for a long time. I think that he is really fun. I like his kit. I think that's great. But I think that he hasn't really been that good in solo queue. But if you'll notice, he definitely does have one of the highest win rates he's had in quite a long time in sort of recent history. He has over a 50% win rate. It had been 47 or 48%. What is it, Rory? What is it? What'd you do? Did you bump yourself?
No, I'm fine.
Oh, you bit yourself?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Oh no. You want to drink some water? It'll make you feel better. Yeah, drink some water, Rory. Be careful. Make sure you don't bite your own fingers. So anyways, I think he's really strong right now, and a big part of that is people have been running Death's Dance. They did nerf that on him recently. But they've nerfed a lot of the other champs that are good against him. He's getting to scale up a little bit more. And, a lot of the bullies, the Jins, the Draven, stuff like that have fallen off. Jin is becoming stronger. He does have a high win rate. And he is kind of coming back into the meta. His swiftness boots did get a buff, and just some other stuff going on in the meta is pretty good for him. But Ezreal still just gets a free pass in the laning phase a lot, and there are a lot of bad Ezreals, but there are a lot of really good Ezreals too. And I think even sort of average Ezreals are starting to do okay on the champion. And a lot of it is the Death Stance. It just gives him just a lot more survivability. It's just so hard to kill this guy. And that's opened up his ability to get Trinity Force more comfortably. You know, he used to get Iceborne Gauntlet a lot because he needed more defense. But now he can get Trinity, which puts out a lot more damage. And you can get Death Stance third, which gives you way more defense and survivability than Blade of the Ruined King. It's probably slightly less damage. Actually, probably significantly less damage in a lot of situations. But the extra damage is a really big deal. Or the extra resistance is a really big deal. It's just so hard to burst him out when he has Death Stance because it delays a portion of the damage, but then also gives him 30-30 on the magic resistant armor. So I think that he's just really strong, very mobile. It's difficult to catch him. Does a lot of poke. Has pretty good burst damage. This has pretty good utility overall. So I do think that Ezreal actually is really strong right now. Even though his win rate once again doesn't reflect that. And it's like, oh, he's only 50%, but you just have to keep it in mind that historically he's been like 47-48% in solo queue most of the time, except in like his most broken meta states. But yeah, he's going to be really good. Misfortune is another one that I think has, fallen off quite a bit, probably more than she deserves to fall off. She still has a lot of utility. She does have the slow. The slow is being negated because a lot of champions are getting swiftness boots, and that allows them not only to have the movement speed, but the slow resistances. So her E is not nearly as strong as it used to be, as far as like zoning power, but she still does like really good poke damage early on with her Q. She has a great wombo combo ult, if you have a really good sort of engage comp, just pressing R from a really long range away can just do a ton of damage. She still has a lot of movement speed. They did nerf that aspect of her, but she still gets around the map really well. It's kind of like the Janna effect where you can just show up to team fights better. It's safer for you to rotate than a lot of other ADCs. So she does have that roam potential that most other ADCs don't have. So it's just really good. And that slow is still nice for allowing your champions like your Leona, your Nautiluses, and your stuff like that to get really good engages. So I still think that she is pretty versatile, and she is going to be a strong champ. Now, people aren't building lethality on her. I think that, that could be an option. People are still building the Infinity Edge stuff, or the Essence Reaver, I guess. Essence Reaver into Infinity Edge, because her ult can crit. It's one of the few abilities in the game that does have a critical strike chance. And, good job, Rory. I don't know if y'all can hear her or not. Wait a second. Okay. I was about to say, oh my god. I was like, is this not recording? I didn't see a bar going on, but it's on a different, it's in a different place. So, okay, good. But anyways, Infinity Edge still looks like it's kind of your or Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge, your go-to items. But something like Ghostblade still has a fairly high win rate, and Umbral Glaive has a very high win rate, but a low pick rate. But I do think that, people, it's possible they should be exploring lethality for the same reason I just talked about with Varus. Umbral Glaive gets you such supreme vision control. It's such a great utility item, and it's so cheap, 2,400 gold to get that rolling. Now, interestingly enough, Manamune actually has an extremely high win rate on her as well. Once again, 2,400 item, very cheap. Your Q does trigger on-hit effect, so it can trigger that later on. Your ult does not trigger it. Your E does not trigger it, but your Q does, and obviously your auto attacks do. You do use the mana really well. You can wave clear with your E very well. It just costs a lot of mana, so I don't know. I haven't seen Manamune Misfortune, but maybe something like that could be okay. I know that people used to get Blade of the Ruined King on her as well. I'm just wondering, is there an alternative build that could help her out a bit more? Just because, once again, the BF sword is just such a pain in the butt, especially if you're behind in lane to get. So, I don't know. Maybe something like Umbral Glaive, with Ghostblade or something like that might be better on her. Lethality is good early on in the game, but it's a lot weaker against tanks, and it doesn't scale nearly as well as Critical Strike does. So if you want those really big one-shot Qs, and you want, the damage to punch through tanks later, Infinity Edge, Essence Reaver are going to be better. But if you do want that utility and more kind of early game power, especially with a much friendlier build path, better back timings, better tempo, maybe something like Umbral Glaive or Manamune. The thing is, Manamune really puts you far behind, and she doesn't scale as well as some of the other champs. She's still like all right, but she definitely kind of falls off in the mid game. So Manamune requires you to get tier, which is pretty weak early on. But like I said, maybe going Umbral into Ghostblade or something like that would give you some really good power. So I don't know. She has the potential for flexibility, kind of like Varus, but maybe Crit is still the best. But that'd be something interesting to explore. And then Vayne, I think, is still really good right now. Now, she kind of benefits sort of like Ezreal from people not playing as many lane-dominant champions. You're seeing a lot of, pick rate-wise, Ezreal, Kai'Sa. Caitlyn is historically pretty good in her at higher elo brackets, but I would say Vayne might actually have the upper hand at lower elo brackets because people don't pressure her enough. And then once Vayne gets Blather and King, I think that's a lot stronger than Caitlyn, as long as Vayne doesn't step on a trap. I think she'll bust Caitlyn up when they both have their ult. Because Vayne can dodge, should be able to dodge Caitlyn's traps and Caitlyn's Qs in her net with her tumble. But anyways, Vayne just scales to be a monster. When she gets the Blather and King Gensu's, if left unchecked, she is one of the best skirmisher YOLO Q ADCs out there. She can solo a lot of tanks. She can even beat up a lot of assassins out there if she gets enough items. So she's still going to be a super strong champ right now, with Blather and King into Gensu's. And she does have some options for utility after that. That's kind of all that you need on Vayne. Usually she just gets something like a Phantom Dancer after that, which is pretty nice. But yeah, very strong, high scaling champ that's just not getting pressured as much and is really good with stuff like Lulu, like Janna, anything that's going to get Ardent Sensor or has other buffs that they can put on her. She is still one of the premier hyperscaling champs out there. So yeah, that's kind of it. I don't have Jhin up there. He is kind of harder to play. He does have a hard time with tanks later on, but he can bully. If you are very proactive with Jhin in the laning phase, he can bully out a lot of the other champions on this list in the early game, like the Vayne, like the Ezreal. So if you're proactive and you really just want to take over the game early, then I think he can still be strong. Okay, last few rolls. We're going to have to do these a bit faster. Mid, I think that Katarina is really strong right now. There's just a ton of... First of all, she has the highest PBI. She does have a good win rate. She is very difficult to play, so let's put that caveat on there. While you're learning her, you are going to lose games. But I think even sort of average Katarinas can be pretty good right now. One of the biggest things is she has an enhanced Grievous Wounds built into her kit with her ultimate. So it's a 60% healing reduction, so you don't have to buy Morellonomicon, which is handy. And there's just so much healing out there that's so OP. Not only the enchanters, like your Sorakas, your Sonas, and things like that are really strong right now, but just so many people have Conquer, so many people are taking Ravenous Hunter, they have built-in healing in their kit, like the Aatrox, like the Kayn, Nunu, just a lot of really powerful champs out there that have healing, and Spirit Visage is really popular as well. So the fact that she cuts a lot of that healing by 60% is a big deal. And she is one of those champs where if she just has one good fight, she can get back into the game in a team fight. She does get the resets. And she just does so much damage so quickly if she gets fed, and she has so much mobility that it can be quite difficult to lock her down if you don't have point-click CC, which a lot of people still just don't play those types of champs. Lulu is becoming more popular. You may want to consider banning Lulu if you're playing Katarina. But she does have some pretty good game against a lot of other champs out there, and she can hyperscale and hypercarry and get back into the game. And she does come online pretty fast. That's why I have her a little bit over Kassadin. Kassadin does have sort of that hyperscaling potential as well, but he takes a bit longer to come online. Her itemization is also very nice. Getting Gunblade early on does give her a huge power spike. It does add a lot of personal healing to her own kit. A little bit of extra burst damage, a little bit of sustain in the laning phase. So it's just a really, really nice item that a lot of champions don't get to purchase, but she's very strong with it. I think does she still do Conquer, or does she gone back to Electrocute? I guess she's back on Dark Harvest. She was on Conquer for a little bit, but I think it's probably been nerfed enough to where she doesn't get it. Yeah, it looks like Dark Harvest is kind of the highest win rate rune right now. That's kind of where most people are. It looks like a lot of people are still taking Electrocute. I guess most people are still taking Conquer on her, but Dark Harvest is actually the highest win rate by a pretty significant margin right now. And part of that is you get to take Sudden Impact with that, which is huge because that does give you the extra spell pin, which is huge on her. Now, Triumph is good, but it's really that spell pin and then getting Eyeball Collection and probably Ravenous Hunter just to, just give you even more sustain is good. Maybe it has to do with the nerf to coup de grace, and there's just not really anything great in the third tree for her. I mean, I guess you take the Tenacity, but the third tree is really lackluster. Triumph is like okay, but it's just the Dark Harvest combination with Sudden Impact is probably why you're taking her a little bit more often. But anyways, yeah, so really good high scaling champ. Death's Dance, I think more and more people are taking Death's Dance as second or third item. Looks like it is actually your highest win rate second item. So it's that new Death's Dance technology, right? She's melee. She does actually scale with AD, which is kind of fun fact. I'm not going to click on her to look at it. But a lot of her abilities are passive, and I think her ultimate do scale with AD, oddly enough, which is partially why she can get Gunblade as well. Okay, I think you got it, Roy. Just put it back down. Set it back down, Roy.
No.
Okay. But yeah, so she can kind of undercover abuser of Death's Dance, sort of like Ezreal. So yeah, that just gives her just an absurd amount of sustain whenever she gets Gunblade plus Death's Dance plus Ravenous Hunter. It's just kind of ridiculous. So I guess people are just thinking you don't need Conquer, and Dark Harvest doesn't require you to stack it up either. You can just instantly, get a lot of that damage, get your resets, and it's just going to put out a lot more burst damage on your resets. So pretty good technologies there. And then the Dark Harvest proc is gonna, Death's Dance will heal you for that. Gunblade will heal you for that because it is magic damage. And Ravenous Hunter will heal you for that. So really just great combination of items, but really it's that Death's Dance, I think, that is taken her to the next level recently. Okay, and then we have Kassadin, still really strong, kind of like what's going on in the bot lane. The game's just slowing down a little bit. People aren't playing as many sort of hard camp, level 2 junglers. Your Xin Zhaos, your Lee Sins are still strong and stuff like that, but people are just gravitating more towards these farm junglers, the Canes, the Fiddlesticks and things like that. And so it's giving Kassadin a little bit more time to farm up in the laning phase, and as everyone knows, once he goes up, he becomes almost unstoppable. It's just, can you shut him down? And he is pretty hard to shut down. He still is going to go for that fleet footwork, just the insane healing build. Now, he can't do stuff like Death's Dance just because he has no AD ratios. Katarina's kind of unique as far as AP assassins go because she does have those ratios. I will actually click on it really quick just to show you what I'm talking about. But that's just, it's a really weird scaling that Riot used to do back in like Season 1. That you just don't see as many champions like this anymore. But she does have a 100% bonus AD ratio on her passive, which is whenever she picks up a dagger, it spins around and does damage. It's magic damage, but it has AD scaling on it. So it's very confusing. But it has that there, and her Death Lotus has 22% bonus AD, and her Shunpo, her E, actually has bonus AD as well. So 3 different abilities. If you get AD, it's actually stronger than her AP scaling. So she's in a unique place to abuse both Gunblade and Death's Dance, all in one kit. So that makes her special. So a lot of champs can benefit from adaptive, like they have an AP build or an AD build they can do, like Kai'Sa, but she literally benefits from both at the exact same time. So items like that are really strong. Anyways, Kassadin scales up. He becomes like a tanky type of assassin, which is really weird, but he does get a shield off his Q, a magic damage shield. He does naturally have 15% magic resistance built into his kit. Or magic negation, I guess. It's not MR, it's a separate deal, but 15% magic negation. And then he builds Rod of the Ages, and he usually gets Seraph's Embrace as well with Tyr. So he has the shield from Tyr, the HP from Rod, the shield from his Q. Usually takes Fleet Footwork, Triumph, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter. So just has like 4 different sustain things in his kit. So he's a lot harder to poke out and to stop in the early game. You'll be surprised if you just watch Kassadin's, you know, especially if you're an old school player. He used to be down like 30, 40 CS in the laning phase, but a lot of them can kind of go even in the laning phase. It is harder, obviously, to contest Scuttles, early Dragons, things like that with Kassadin. You have very limited wave clear. You are just going to be pretty bad in the early game. But if he does get a couple of kills, he's one of the hardest champions to stop once he really gets to those 2 items. Once he gets his Rod fully stacked, and he gets to like Lich Bane, it's very, very difficult to stop him. Okay, Echo's another one who is pretty strong, and he's a flex pick as well. Maokai's another like interesting or useful part of picking him as support is people don't know that he's a support a lot of times. They'll assume that he's top lane. And especially if you're an early pick, that can really mess with people, and they'll think, oh, I got to try to counterpick Maokai top lane, and then they figure out he's a support. So great flex pick early. Echo's another one that's like that, is people just don't know where he's going because he can comfortably go like mid lane and jungle. You know, if you ask Scott from chat, he can go support as well. He can go to a lot of different lanes, but he's just still really strong. I mean, he has a great build path as well, where you can get Proto Belt into Hourglass, which is super strong. It's kind of a similar premise to what I was talking about with the BF Sword as ADC. He doesn't have to build Ludens, so, you know, he's not waiting around on Lost Chapter, paying a lot of gold for mana, which doesn't do damage in the laning phase, waiting around on Blasting Wands. You know, Proto Belt's just a really cheap item that cheats the curve. It's 2,500 gold. Gives a lot of extra burst damage if you can get point blank and hit him with all the bolts, which he can do very easily. And then your second one, your Hourglass, gives you a ton of utility with him. Allows you to be a lot more aggressive. And is once again a very cheap item. I think it's $26.50. So he just has 2 really cheap early items, great scaling, really good utility, the potential for huge stuns, shields, basically 2 life bars, very high burst damage, great chase potential, really great escape potential. So it's a super strong champion in general right now. Flexes to multiple roles. Very good against other assassins like Katarina, like Fizz. So yeah, just really, really strong champion. You could definitely make the case he could be number 1 right now, potentially. Fizz is another one who is really strong and kind of goes under the radar, I think, a lot of the time. But his mobility, and particularly his ability to go untargetable, is huge. That does allow him to very comfortably tower dive early on, so you can go down to bot lane and try to make some really aggressive plays. Does huge burst damage, and he can just get around. Like, he has so much outplay potential with his E. You know, if Syndra tries to ult you, you can Playful Trickster it with the E, dodge a lot of that. You know, Katarina is trying to hit you with stuff, you can dodge that. So you can just dodge a lot of different abilities. You can dodge Twisted Fate's gold card. Twisted Fate's a very, you know, definitely rising in popularity, seeing a lot of pro play. The fact that you can dodge that really comfortably with Fizz. So he just has a lot of really good matchups, does a ton of burst damage. He can also cheat the curve really well, doesn't have to get a mana item, so he can go Proto Belt, Zhonya's as well, similar to Echo. His thing is he just can dodge CC a lot better. If Echo gets chain CC'd, he can get blown up before he ults. So that is a concern. But Fizz just gets around so many things, and it just makes him really, really strong right now. Does he still have Grievous Wounds built into his kit? I don't think he does. I think they took that out a while ago. But he can get around, like, Janna is just really annoying to deal with Fizz because he's going to jump your tornado. You still have your ult, but and there's a lot of supports that are like that, where he just like gets around your CC. Lulu, if Lulu tries to polymorph him, he can jump that too. Polymorph is a projectile. A lot of people don't realize that, but it can be dodged by untargetable things. So like if you try to polymorph a Master Yi when he's alpha striking, he will dodge it. With Fizz, he will dodge it with his Playful Trickster. So you have to wait until they do the Playful Trickster first, and then try to hit him with it afterwards. But by the time he lands his Shark, and then Trickster and lands on your AD carrier, lands on you, you're already dead before you can even polymorph him. So it's just his trading pattern is very, very difficult to get around. Yeah, it looks like he doesn't apply a free Grievous Wounds anymore. He used to have free Grievous Wounds built into his kit. So they took that out, but nevertheless, he's still just a super, super strong champion right now because he has that fast build path, and just Trickster allows you to get around so many things and just cheat so many systems in the game that makes him pretty unique. And his stuff is on a pretty low cooldown as well. Twisted Fate is the final one that I'll mention. He is rising in popularity right now. I think that Ghost is very strong on him and very underrated. They did buff that on this patch. It's just huge. He can stay in range, keep landing his autos, keep landing the gold cards, kite out a lot of stuff. And he can also take Unsealed Spellbook and uses that really well, which I think is becoming a lot more popular, especially because, Ghost is becoming more useful. What is it, Rory? So you can actually, use Ghost as your main thing and then use that teleport if you need to get back to a lane with Unsealed Spellbook. So he's just really strong. I mean, the point-click gold card, excellent for ganks. When you're ganking his lane, when you're a jungler coming to his lane, he has that gold card, you just know it's going to be a high-quality gank because it's so hard for most people that are not Fizz to outplay the gold card. And then obviously his ganks in the side lane are going to be really massive as well. And there are multiple builds that people are trying out on Twisted Fate that are good. You still have your classic, Void Staff kind of tankier build with Witchbane and things like that. But then, more and more people are trying out kind of these AD type of builds too, with Trinity Force to do higher sustained damage over time. You go Trinity Force, Rapid Fire Cannon, that type of stuff to do a little bit more sustained damage TF. And you're not seeing that all the time, but it is something that's definitely on the docket that people are thinking about. If you do want another sustained damage champ to help you just churn out CC and carve through tanks later on in the game, he can help do that with the ADC. So it's kind of a flexible champ. Excellent macro, some of the best in the game. Just instantly gets those side lanes and applies a ton of pressure on the map. He can help you jungle invade. It's just super, super good ultimate for solo queue if you use it properly. And just very good wave clear, great CC. So just classically a really good champ in solo queue if you're really well practiced and use his ult well. But some of these indirect buffs to things like Ghost and nerfing out some of his competition has definitely made him stronger. The fact that he doesn't need a mana item is really good too. I mean, Rod is kind of a mana item. It does help, but he doesn't need a Ludens, I should say, like a super heavy mana item. And he can still be really effective. Okay, looks like we'll probably go a little bit over an hour as usual, so the meme is still real, but we'll keep going. Okay, Nunu, I think, is really undercover on this patch. I mean, a lot of people are talking about him, but I think he's going to be super strong. I kind of want to try him out as support, honestly. Just because, you're going to have... What? Okay, I don't know what was going on there, but... he does have a pretty high win rate right now. I honestly thought his win rate was going to go up a little bit, but I think a lot of people just aren't trying out the new items as much on him. People are trying out the Proto Belt still, which seems to be increasing in popularity. Phase Rush seems a little odd. But I thought more and more people would be trying out Runic Echoes. It seems like that's really bad, though, on Nunu. Apparently, it's 49% win rate versus 54% for Cinderhulk, so... I had speculated maybe Runic would be alright. Now, Leandri's is still really good, though. As a second or a third item, I still think that can be really strong. But it looks like the build is still going to be, Cinderhulk into Deadman's, and then, check out the other stuff after that. So it's like the AP ratio boost that he got on this patch is nice, but he was still really good anyways, and it looks like it might just be a bait for people to try to get Runic Echoes, but Cinder, I guess, is still just going to be really strong, because he does scale with health, too, right? Like, his Chomp scales with health, and his ult scales with health, so if you're getting the AP, you're not getting the health, so it's kind of like, what do they say, like, 12 eggs in one hand, and a dozen in the other, whatever, it's the same thing, but health actually, increases your survivability as well as giving you, the extra damage. So anyways, He's still really good, though. Applies a lot of pressure early game if you need to do that. His snowball ganks are some of the best ganks in the business, especially if you have the Scuttle Shrine secured, and he's very, very good at last-hitting Scuttles, last-hitting monsters in general. But yeah, you come out of that Scuttle Shrine, flying on the snowball. By the way, if you don't realize this, if you start the snowball while you're on the shrine, you actually get the bonus movement speed for the entire duration of the snowball. So it's really, really strong to have that Scuttle with Nunu. And a lot of times, even if it's warded, you're coming in so fast if you're doing like good ganking angles that it's just really hard for them to react with most champions by the time you get there. So really, really strong early game ganks. Actually scales reasonably well late game too. A lot of people think that he falls off. I really don't think so, especially if you get like a Leandri's third item. It's a lot of damage. Now he has even better AP ratios. Almost all of his abilities apply a slow or some kind of CC. So you get the double value out of Leandri's without having to get something like Rylai's. It does give health and AP on one item, so he gets double scaling off of that because he scales with health and AP, as we just said. So I think that, Cinderhulk into something like Deadman's into Leandri's is really underrated and could potentially be a super powerful build that does high sustain damage, has very good engage, and very good survivability. So I think he's really good. Has pretty strong clear. In solo queue especially, just being able to guarantee that last hit, the Q plus the smite, 99%, you're going to get Dragon, you're going to get Baron. This is so strong in mid elos especially because a lot of times the support and other people just won't zone out the enemy jungle. So you just pretty much have to have the enemy jungler dead, or you're just going to 50-50 a smite fight in a lot of cases in like your gold and your platinum games. But with Nunu, that's fine. You can smite fight because you're going to get them all, basically, unless they're like Cho'Gath, or unless you mistime your Q plus your smite, you're going to be able to take contested objectives. And if you're behind, you can steal the objective. If they're foolish enough to try to sit there and do a Baron, and you have vision on them, and you're just sitting there with Nunu, you have a really good chance of flashing over that wall and stealing that Baron. So just his objective control is supreme. Fast farmer, very safe. If they try to engage or invade you and fight you, you're probably going to be full health. And yeah, maybe you can't 1v1 the Lee Sin or whatever that's fighting you, but you can lock them up. You're going to have a lot of health, and you can stall and CC them long enough for your mid laner or your top laner to get over there and clean them up. So I just think he's good in pretty much every situation. There aren't many situations where I wouldn't want Nunu. There are some counter picks that are pretty strong, like Trundle is very good against him. Trundle's been nerfed a lot, though, and he's not super popular in lower elos right now, or like mid-level elos. Things like Anivia with her wall, like there are some random things that are very good against Nunu, but he's really good against a lot of the other stuff out there, so that's why I have him as my number one overall pick right now. Volibear is definitely really strong right now too. He has been buffed a ton over the last couple of patches, so he is definitely becoming really strong. Very high win rate, bordering on 54%, high ban rate, high pick rate. So he just brings a lot to the table. He's got that point-click CC with his E, I think it is, and then he does really high sustain damage with his W, or it's the Q, is the point-click CC. Really high sustain damage with his W. A good shield with his E. Really strong like backline access with his R. So he's very good. I guess a lot of people are going Trinity, it looks like. Cinderhulk into Trinity, and then Deadman's. Deadman's is very strong on him. But yeah, that's kind of looking like the build that everyone's sort of settling on that is really good. Had seen people goofing around with some other builds, but I think that's probably a strong choice. But yeah, just tons of damage, tons of tankiness, really good mobility, pretty good utility in a lot of fights. He's finally there. He had the kit. With his new release, I thought he was going to come out a lot stronger than he was, but his numbers were just too low. They buffed up his numbers, and he just kind of is off to the races. He's also a flex pick. He's pretty strong in top lane as well, but I think he's a little bit better in the jungle. Okay, Master Yi, especially at Gold and lower, everybody knows this guy. We don't need to explain too much about him. Weak in the early game, but if he gets a couple of kills, it's off to the races. He's extremely difficult to stop once he gets to 2 items, once he gets the Ginsu's plus Blood Razor. Very, very difficult to deal with. High sustained damage, very good dueling potential, great split push, great at taking towers, great at taking objectives. He's just super OP late game. Obviously, even in the mid game, he's really strong. And then usually, either Death's Dance or Wit's End after that. Makes him extremely difficult to stop. Now, you can shut him down early if you invade him or bully him. You can fight him around scuttles. If you can chain CC him, yes, he is going to be, you can stop him, but it's just extremely risky because, you know, he can feed off of any of the lanes, right? So it's like, yeah, maybe you can handle him. You know, maybe you're playing something like, you know, Varus plus Lulu bottom, and it's like, all right, we got him on lock. Like, we got some CC, we're ready for him. But then, you know, he gets a few kills top lane, feasts off of the top lane, and then all of a sudden, it's a lot more difficult to deal with him in the mid game. So, and the reason that he's so strong, you know, most people know this, but it's just the combination of his double strike with true damage and the way that that interacts with Blood Razor and Gensu's. He just has so many auto attacks, and he can get triple hits off of his Gensu's plus his double strike passive to like triple proc Blood Razor, and then just all of his other stuff in his kit just does so much sustained damage, and even pretty high burst damage with his Alpha Strike, and his ability to get those resets. And with Alpha, like, when he gets that strong, it's so easy to say, oh, we'll just CC him, but the problem is he goes untargetable. You know, every time he kills somebody, he gets to go untargetable again and then kill somebody else within 0.5 seconds. So you have very small windows in team fights when he's going off to actually land CC on him. And he's very fast, too. He's immune to slows, first of all. So slows aren't going to do anything. It has to be hard CC. And the fact that he's so fast, he can just, like, sidestep and dodge a lot of stuff. Then his alpha makes him untargetable as well, so even point clicks like Lulu's Polymorph can be problematic if he alphas that. And he can take flash. And like if you're, you know, causing some serious problems for him, if you have a lot of point click CC that he is having a hard time alphaing, he can get Quicksilver Sash. So because he doesn't need a ton of gold to be effective. Like, yes, he is very good if he has a ton of gold, but just 2 items, right? Just Blood Razor, Gensu's, and he's going to be very effective. So then he can take a break, you know, and get a Quicksilver Sash as his third half item if he wants to do that, if he feels like he needs to. So he does have options in his build for that type of stuff. And if you have a lot of burst damage, you know, he can take something like Death's Dance as a third item too to help out with that. So he just has a lot of different build options once you get past the first 2 items, and he's just really difficult to stop. So I think he definitely deserves a top 5 spot. I don't have him higher because, you know, he can be blown up by some of these assassins. You know, things like Katarina, Kassadin, Echo. A lot of these champs can just blow him up before he does enough damage in the early game, even if they don't have the CC. But if he does get to that late game power, it's going to be a problem. Okay, Kane's another one who's becoming a lot stronger. He did receive several buffs. Red Kane is still, you know, one of the strongest ones to go on him right now. But Blue Kane is still, like, pretty good and pretty respectable. Is he not... Where... Oh, I'm overlooking him. Yeah, there he is. Second most, or highest PBI champ. But yeah, I mean, he just wave clears really fast, farms super well, has creative gank patterns he can go for, and he's kind of versatile. He can go for that tanky lifesteal build, which is usually correct. But if they do have a lot of squishies on their team, Blue Kane's actually pretty strong right now. I mean, he's super fast. Pretty much his you know, wall ghost ability is almost always up in Blue Kane, does extreme, you know, burst damage, high mobility. It's easy to get in and get out. And yeah, he's just really strong. So just combining sort of Assassin with the ability to go Bruiser, or the ability to double down on the Assassin with some extreme mobility, very high farm potential. He can even push lanes really quickly, does a lot of damage to lane minions as well. So just Hyper Farmer and Assassin, which is a really good combination right now. And then Fiddlesticks had on here as well. He did get a couple of nerfs, which did matter for his clear speed with his W. Now that's mostly just for lane Fiddlesticks, but it does affect his ability to push when you need to be able to push. My thing with Fiddlesticks, like, he is super strong, but he is very vulnerable to invades. If you invade him and beat him up, it is difficult to deal with that. But if he's allowed to do his thing and just get some really good ganks off, you know, he has great CC, great vision control, like super good power farming capabilities. You can farm multiple camps at a time, Raptors in red or blue, and Gromp. So really good champ, very high scaling, lots of great CC. I don't like the lane Fiddlesticks as much. I've seen some people trying that, especially in pro. I'm not sold on that. But I think in the jungle, he is really, really good, especially if your team's ahead or is helping you establish vision. If they're sweeping for you, if everyone's using a control ward, he's really, really good. But it is very vision dependent. If they have very good vision control, if they have like an Umbral Glaive ADC or jungler, or they are just pressuring you really hard and not allowing you to get good deep vision, then it can be hard to find spots. It just all comes down to late game. Does he get good ult placement or not? Right? If they see you, if they, don't play into your ultimate, then he's going to be really weak. If you get off some super strong ults, he can feel unstoppable. So he is a very strong champ. He does have kind of a hard time against tanks too. Unless you're like mega fed, just because they can take adaptive helm, which is just insanely good against him. But nevertheless, he can be pretty strong. And stuff that takes some of that longer range stuff is also a problem, because it's hard to get position on someone like Ezreal or Varus, because they can play so far back from their front line that it's hard to get those ults where you're just getting like all 5 people, with the Pogger's ult. It's really hard to get that against a lot of these popular and powerful ADCs, especially Varus and Ezreal, because they play so far back. But he is particularly good against, and a lot of the supports play pretty far back too, like the Soraka, the Janna, the Lulu. The spacing is difficult if they have like 3 ranged champions on their team against Fiddlesticks. But, obviously going to be really good against like Katarina and Echo. If you can CC them before they do their thing, or like Fizz, then you can blow them up pretty quickly. So I think he is very good right now for sure. But it is very nice to have a tank in the jungle and a tank top lane that allows you to run an Enchanter support much more comfortably. And I think the Enchanters are super good right now as supports. So that it's kind of a meta thing, right? If you have a tank like a Leona or something else that can start a fight, I think Fiddlesticks is a lot better. But if your support wants to run like a Soraka or a Janna or something like that, it gets a lot worse, because you can just get bulldozed, right? Especially if you're behind, you just don't have any ways to start fights. I mean, like, you can start the fight obviously with your ult, but if you're not getting good vision control, it can be tough. So anyways, he is good, but he's better if you have a tank in the bot lane, and Enchanters, I think, overall are just going to be better than a lot of the tanks. If you're looking at win rate wise, Maokai's still kind of up there, but your Blitzcrank's kind of there. But your more traditional stuff, your Leonas and your Nautiluses, are hanging out around like 50%, some of their lowest win rates in over a year. So they're still like all right. They're just not as dominant as they were. And a lot of people are still like, Thresh is always going to be the highest pick just because people like to play him. But they're falling out of favor as much, right? Only 10% representation on Nautilus, 8% on Leona, versus, half a year ago you'd see like 20% on each one of these or more. So just a lot less people are playing tanks. So that makes Fiddlesticks a little bit less valuable. Okay, and then the last one here, Darius, I think, is still going to be one of the number 1 top laners. Now, you could argue Volibear, but I'm only listing these champs once and just saying they're a flex pick. But I think Darius is still really good. His win rate hasn't gone up that much with the Ghost change, which is a little curious. I thought he was going to be like mega OP, and I thought a lot of people were thinking that this patch. But I think it might actually be down a little bit, oddly enough. Maybe it's because more people are playing him that just aren't really well practiced on him. He does have a delta of 8.2, so people with that play him a lot win 8% more games on him, which is an extremely high delta. But nevertheless, just really good, especially with Ghost. It doesn't require a charge up time anymore, and you get resets. That's so huge in team fights, because you get the kill, you get a reset on your ult, you get a reset on your Ghost. It's just really, really OP. He can shred through tanks, he can shred through squishies. He can get kited against some of these longer range champs like the Ezreal, like the Varus. Janna is like one of his worst nightmares. So a lot of these champs can kind of kite him, but it's really hard with Ghost and Flash. You're probably going to get on somebody, and if you do get a kill, then you just blow everyone else up, because once you get those full stacks on your ult, and then you're just able to get a Q and put the full stacks on someone else, it's so much damage. Even without your ult, it's a lot of bleed damage. So he scales extremely well, very quickly, high base damage, Trinity Force, super powerful, single item power spike. You can take something like a Dead Man's Plate if you want to next. And just that's going to give you even more capabilities to get on people with the ghost, because you're going to have much higher base movement speed off of Deadman's. Good survivability, very good Conqueror user, heals a lot off of that. I don't know if he takes Ravenous Hunter. I don't know what his secondaries are, because I don't play Darius a lot top. But if you take something like that, you get a ton of healing. I wouldn't even be surprised if he takes Death's Dance at some point. I don't think he typically does that, because he already has healing. You probably just get a Spirit Visage, but it doesn't really matter. Just Trinity Force and just murder everybody once you play him. So, super strong champ. There are probably some matchups that can be tricky for him. But overall, just really, really good. Good dueling, good split pushing if you take Deadmans, because you do have Ghost to escape. You have Deadmans to run away. You can't just fight people 2v1 half the time if you're ahead. So he just puts a lot of pressure on fights. And then obviously super strong in team fights. Very good with champs that speed people up too. So like Lulu's very popular. Really awesome with Darius. You give him that movement speed. You give him the ult to get in there and do his thing. Shirelias. People are realizing the power of Shirelias. More people are running that. You know, Soraka, Rakan, Janna, Lulu. Everybody can run Shirelias. So anyways, I think he's going to be super, super strong right now. Wukong, also really good. Has the highest PBI right now. And he's still good. People kind of forgot about this champ. They've been sleeping on him. He's still ridiculous. Like, he brings so much utility, very high damage, really high single item power spike, you know, multi-target AoE CC that just like instantly applies Black Cleaver to everybody, instantly stacks your Conqueror, has additional armor shred off of his Q. So it's just super armor shred, great utility. Just a really strong champion overall. Like, high damage, high utility, pretty good just base tankiness with his passive. So yeah, just OP champ in general right now. So still going to be very strong. Garen is respectable. A lot more people are coming onto the Garen hype train right now. He's coming back up there. Very easy to play. Good bully in the laning phase. Kind of like Wukong. You know, stacks up Conqueror, stacks up Cleaver if you want to. Really well. Does like Trinity Force. I know people were doing Trinity and Black Cleaver for a little bit there. I think people were kind of off of that train, but great abuser of Death's Dance as well. Sterax, good. Kind of like I was talking about with Darius, can split push really well and run away really easily. You don't need Deadmans or anything for it, but nevertheless can be a really strong champ. So yeah. Very good. And then Set, I think, is still pretty good. His win rate has dropped off a lot, but very good trading, excellent utility, good engage later on, good at applying Black Cleaver to everybody if you want to go the Cleaver route, and just overall strong champ, especially against squishy champs with the true damage. He's going to be good. And Singe is the last one that I'll mention. Not a lot of people are talking about Singe right now, but he is definitely the other big beneficiary of Ghost. He loved taking this rune anyways. It's obviously super powerful on him in team fights, getting those resets so you can run around even faster. Just make sure, please, that you get the Rylai's plus the Leandries. You really want to do that. I know I see some people. Deadman's is like okay to rush, sort of. Because you do keep the movement speed until you auto attack somebody, so that is really nice. So if you want to go for a tank item, I think Deadman's the best. I really don't like Righteous Glory because you don't have a hard time getting on people and engaging, right? I mean, I guess that's nice for like team fights, but just get the damage, man. Just go for the Rylai's, go for the Leandries, get you some Conqueror, get Ravenous Hunter, and just go to work. So that helps his wave clear. You do a lot more damage to the wave. That helps his team fight damage and helps his 1v1 damage. So just make sure you're getting the Rylai's, you're getting the Leandries. The buff to Boots of Swiftness does help him out a lot. Ghost helps him out a lot. He is very good against a lot of these tanks out there, like the Darius, the Garen, the Wukong. And the reason is they have a hard time sticking to him. They have a hard time getting out of his poison. You know, when he puts the goo on them, they have a hard time getting through that. So he just kind of gums up champs that don't have a lot of mobility, that don't have a ton of just upfront burst on him. He can really abuse that. He can usually outpush him. They have a hard time running him down if he wants to proxy. So yeah, I think they are some of his best matchups. Strong against. So yeah, it looks like he's, really good against Ornn, Poppy, Aatrox, just a lot of those types of champs. And then it says he's weak against, some of these ranged champs, especially that can bully him early on. So like the Quinn, Vayne, Gangplank, Teemo, that type of stuff. So yeah, great against tanks, a little bit worse against the squishy, like high mobility champs. But yeah, I think he's really, really good, and he's probably the most slept on top laner right now in this meta. I think he's good against a lot of the stuff, and he's good in a lot of different team comps, and he's magic damage. So if you have a physical damage jungler, physical damage mid laner, which is becoming increasingly popular, then he is going to be pretty good there. And I guess, you could put Yasuo in there. I guess Yasuo is kind of a conspicuous omission because he does have a high win rate, and he can be played in like 4 different roles right now. I don't like him ADC, but more people are playing him ADC. But where is Yasuo as far as like win rates go? But he's a really high skill cap champ. I mean, overall he has a 48% win rate, so he is banned a lot. I know there are people that hate him on the channel. Jolty, looking at you. I know there are people that really hate him. I just feel like he's just inconsistent. I'm just never really like against like a super Yasuo. It's like, all right, but it just feels like there's always a way to me that you can outplay him, even if he is really fed. Like I know win wall is really annoying, but like you can position around it in some situations. Melee champions bust him up, and a lot of these champs are melee. A lot of these really stronger champs are melee. And he just has a hard time against stuff like Rakan, Janna, Lulu. Like, Lulu can polymorph him, Janna can knock him back, Soraka can silence him, which is really frustrating when he ults somebody and then you silence that. Rakan. So, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that's pretty good against him out there. So, it's like, if you're a godlike Yasuo player, yes, he can definitely, be pretty good. But I just feel like a lot of time there are better options. But if you're good on him, you can definitely make him work in multiple roles. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Come by, check out the stream, and check out the rest of the content on the channel. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.